Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to let my fellow Americans know something that might shock them. We all know that fentanyl is a scourge on our country. We all know that fentanyl is produced by the Mexican drug cartels. We all know that the precursor chemicals for fentanyl come from Chinese companies. What you might not know is that we can't even get a FISA warrant to stop that, to collect intelligence on those production companies, on those attorneys, on those bankers, on those facilitators that help the cartels murder and poison tens of thousands of Americans every single year. That's a pretty shocking statement. I bet you didn't know that. Well, you should know that. You know, FISA, despite all of the misinformation put out about it, is actually very narrowly tailored. It only allows you to get a warrant on a foreigner in a foreign land if it's related to foreign intelligence, if it's related to counter weapons of mass destruction, or if it's related to counterterrorism. Nowhere in there is counter narcotics, the thing that's actually killing Americans today and every single day. My amendment would simply upgrade that categorization to ensure that we can collect intelligence on the Chinese precursor being shipped into Mexico and into our own country so that we can actually stop the death of Americans. It's a very narrowly tailored amendment. It's not about all drug traffickers. It does not swoop in a bunch of Americans. It is about international drug traffickers trafficking illicit synthetics that are killing people. It's a very simple amendment. It's a bipartisan amendment. It is one of the biggest things that I've learned as my role as chairman on the cartel task force, that we actually are blind to the supply chains of fentanyl. To be against this amendment is to say we should give the cartels and China more Fourth Amendment rights and more First Amendment rights than we have. That's what it would mean in practice. And I hope that anyone who votes against this amendment, I hope you stop talking about the cartels being a problem. Because if we're not even allowed to collect intelligence on the cartels, then what are we doing? What are we doing? At this point, I would like to yield 2 minutes to my friend, Representative Houlihan.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Crenshaw, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I also rise in support of this important amendment that will help our intelligence community, strengthen our southern border, and will save American lives. This amendment will fully enlist our country's intelligence agencies in the fight against foreign drug traffickers. Foreign-made fentanyl is killing tens of thousands of Americans every year, and so it is, of course, critical that we start treating this danger as the very serious national threat that it is. So my legislation, which is called the Enhancing Intelligence Collection on Foreign Drug Traffickers Act, is now the bipartisan amendment that is led by myself and Mr. Crenshaw, and this would allow our intelligence community to counter drug cartels as they attempt to bring deadly fentanyl to our shores. Today, the intelligence community can only leverage Section 702 against counter-narcotics targets under one of the existing certifications, none of which are focused currently on drug trafficking. So this amendment would close that gap without expanding domestic law enforcement's abilities to police drug dealers in order to keep fentanyl from ever reaching the United States. So I urge my colleagues to pass this legislation, to pass the counter-narcotics amendment led by myself and Mr. Crenshaw, and to reject any amendment that would put our national security at risk. Thank you, and I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
I just want to say to those opposed to the underlying bill, I understand we're going to have to agree to disagree. But I cannot imagine being opposed to this amendment even if you vote against the overall bill. I thought we all agreed that the cartels are one of our #1 threats. They're killing tens of thousands of Americans every year by poisoning them with fentanyl. We need to know how they're doing it. We need to know who their suppliers are. We need to know who's laundering their money. We can't know that within our current law. All we have to do is allow ourselves to do it. This is one of the most important things that I think our constituents actually care about. If we're going to act like we have sympathy for sons and daughters who have been killed from an overdose of fentanyl, then we actually have to take action on it. I got to say, too, that the warrant amendment would kill our ability to do this. Remember, the whole point of drug trafficking is to get it in the United States, y'all. The whole point of terrorism is to conduct a terrorist attack here in the United States. When you're collecting intelligence on foreigners, the only way they do those things is to communicate with entities inside the United States. To demand a secondary warrant just to search that communication kills our ability to connect those dots. And I yield back.
Mr. Speaker. I seek recognition.
I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The Crenshaw Amendment would expand FISA's definition of foreign intelligence to encompass international drug crimes. FISA is a counterintelligence and counterterrorism tool. Its limitation to that purpose and the clear distinction between foreign intelligence and crime are essential to preserving fundamental liberties of Americans under our constitutional system. It is the essential design of the law, spying abroad, criminal justice at home. Simply redefining foreign intelligence to include ordinary crime eviscerates the entire distinction on which the design of the FISA law rests. And the Intelligence Committee proponents of this amendment fail even to explain to us why this blurred definition is needed. They assert it, but they don't explain it. After all, the DNI's FISA Section 702 fact sheet lists the government's use of Section 702 to learn about our adversaries' plans to smuggle fentanyl into the United States as the #1 successful use of existing Section 702. If Section 702 already allows us to go after fentanyl, why do we need to change and blur the critical definition of foreign intelligence? What is the purpose of doing so? What comes next? I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman has the only time remaining.
To the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman from North Carolina, and I would just note that I certainly appreciate the intent of my friend and colleague from Texas. Obviously, we want to go after cartels. We want to make sure we can stop the flow of fentanyl into our communities that are killing and ravaging Texans and Americans across our country. The problem here is it's unnecessary. They can go certify right now. They can go right now and go certify a whole nother class. You don't need this law to do that. That's the important part. You don't need this amendment, and you don't need to risk expanding it. But here's my real problem. Just today, we have information where we had a terrorist on an Afghan watch list who was released into San Antonio, Texas. ICE just walked away from it, and now we have somebody on the terrorist watch list sitting in San Antonio, Texas. So I'm supposed to say I want to grant more power to the intelligence community, more power to the government that is releasing terrorists as we speak onto the streets of Texas. It defies any kind of logic. They have the tools to do what they need to go after fentanyl without expanding FISA, which is being abused against Americans. And by the way, you need the warrant requirement in order to protect against expansion of FISA. I yield back.
Once time has expired, gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Everyone agrees that the fentanyl crisis is a terrible and serious public health and crime issue. But a mass, warrantless surveillance tool created by word games is not the answer. It's dangerous. Indeed, the willingness and desire of some to create exactly that points back to the reasons that Congress must impose a warrant requirement to deter the abuse of the Section 702 Foreign Intelligence Database collected to surveil foreigners abroad to permit backdoor searches against Americans. That is the issue. Oppose the Crenshaw Amendment and support the Biggs Amendment to make them get a warrant. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlemen,
lạnh buồn ơi nói không nên lời để cạn niềm yêu mến anh. Phút gần gũi này thôi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, tay nắm tay không rời, mắt ngắm xa chân trời mà lòng nghe nhớ thương hoài. Anh ơi chớ quên ngày mai đã có em chờ anh, chung xây đẹp ý đời. Tương lai e ấp trên môi, yêu nhau ta thầm nói, nụ cười trao duyên mới ước vọng để mà vui. Khuya nay anh đi rồi, đem chí trai xây đời, đem mến thương cho người người đợi chờ anh ơi. Phút gần gũi này thôi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, tay nắm tay không rời, mắt ngắm xa chân trời mà lòng nghe nhớ thương hoài. Anh ơi chớ quên ngày mai đã có em chờ anh, chung xây đẹp ý đời. Tương lai e ấp trên môi, yêu nhau ta thầm nói, nụ cười trao duyên mới ước vọng để mà vui. Khuya nay anh đi rồi, đem chí trai xây đời, đem mến thương cho người người đợi chờ anh ơi. Đem chí trai xây đời, đem mến thương cho người người đợi chờ.